Hello, this is Brian. Today is Tuesday, July 11th, 2023, and I'm here in Ruffin Canyon open space in Serra Mesa, San Diego. It's time for a Spotlight on Shrubs video. Today's spotlight is on a shrub I spotlighted once before, about 3 years ago, but the quality of the video came out very poorly on a camera that I was using. So today, I want to spotlight this here, the Toyon. And this is Heteromeles arbutifolia. The Toyon is a typically medium to very large shrub, occasionally reaching small tree size. Again, evergreen leafed, and it is a member of the rose family, the Rosaceae. And it is in the subsection Maleae, the section that has the apples, pears, quinces, and a lot of other related shrubs. And I'll go into that momentarily. So what we have here is a very large specimen here. A lot of times they do get this large fairly often, sometimes up to over 20 feet tall. And they are named, I believe it came from a Spanish adaptation of an Indian Native American word, Toyon or something like that, I believe I read somewhere. I think that might mean canyon, I'm not sure, but Toyons are known for their quite large evergreen leaves, up to sometimes 5 inches long, medium to dark green, the older growth being darker green and the newer growth being bright green. And it's a very dense, thicket-forming shrub. Sometimes also has only a few main trunks and forms the size of a small tree. And in these moister canyons under shadier slopes, this is where you're going to expect them to attain their largest size, such as this one here, and they can have very large trunks for what you'd expect on a shrub. So I'm going to move on down the line a little bit. Well, first of all, let's stick over here, because Toyon is basically a California endemic, and it goes along the Central Valley, the foothills of the Central Valley, not in the Central Valley so much itself, along the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, the Coast Ranges, parts of Northern California. And it also grows from the coast to about 5,000 feet here in Southern California's mountains. I've seen it about as high as 5,000 feet near Santiago Peak in Orange County's Cleveland National Forest, Santa Ana Mountains, along Main Divide Truck Trail. So in the late spring and summer months, get these beautiful 5-petal white flowers that are very striking. And they are very coveted by the honeybees and other pollinating bugs. So when they flower, they form these open, panicle-like clusters, and for the early part of summer, quite captivatingly beautiful. They're small, whitish, hard to get the best details because the petals are so small, and they're 5-petaled, and they kind of smell like pear flowers. So some people find the aroma of the flowers unpleasant. I just think of it as kind of a woodsy aroma. Yeah, they smell like pear flowers, and they're related to pears, actually, being in the Maleae subgroup of the rose family. So this video is going to take me a while to make, only because I also want to shoot this video when these are fruiting, because the fruit of the Toyon, which is a small red pome, which is very numerous on this plant during the fall and early winter months, is another reason to pay attention to this shrub. So, even though I'm recording this segment in July, I'll be recording more segments for this video in later months so we can get the full effect of this beautiful Toyon. So, the bark of the Toyon, twigs are grayish color, and they mature into some light to medium gray, relatively smooth bark that with further aging turns into very light, darker gray furrowing. Very light. So let me go see if I can find some larger trunks. Alright, so I'm here now at Mission Trails Regional Park here on Wednesday, September 13th, 2023, to continue this spotlight on the ubiquitous Toyon shrub. And now we are in the middle of its developing fruit, as I'm still looking around for a specimen with older furrowed bark. This is not a very old specimen here, but again, talking about that relatively smooth gray bark on younger specimens. It gets a little darker and a little more furrowed with age. But I kind of want to do an update about how the fruits are developing now that we are in the middle of September and we're getting a little bit closer to the ripening of these fruits. As you can see here, they're starting to get closer to full size. As you see here, and we're developing pretty well into these pomes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go look around for some more and older specimens. Maybe I can look at some more of these larger ones that we have here. Let's see what else I could find. Alright, so as we're continuing this spotlight video, this is right on the start of the Grinding Rocks Trail, right below Father Junipero-Serra Trail. So now we get to see a more mature Toyon in some of its beautiful, luscious glory. Now this one may be kind of sparse, as you can tell this one's probably been through some issues, especially with the drought that we've had periodically. But this is a pretty good example of how large they can get. And I say pretty good because it's not the perfect example, because I've seen them get much larger than this. But I did mention in a previous clip about the bark of Toyon when it gets older. Now this is what I was talking about. Now we see kind of like a lightish to medium gray here on the smaller branches. As you see here, relatively smooth. However, when the trunks get much older, they start showing signs of furrowing. And this is not really deeply furrowed. This is actually almost smooth, but it's starting to show the signs of what the bark becomes on the larger, older specimens. You see here, this one's very well furrowed. So when the Toyon trunk gets old enough, the bark becomes more furrowed. So this is exactly a specimen I was looking to try to find to illustrate my point on how the bark of this plant gets when it's older. We had a lot of nice mature Toyons in the area, and again, since we're in mid-September, their fruits, most of the flowers are done. Some Toyons flower periodically later into the year, sometimes start earlier in the year, but usually around this time we are developing our fruit. the fruit again, is a pome. And when I wrap up this video during the fall, when the pomes are ripening, you'll get to see them in their full, beautiful glory. Now we're starting to already get some coloration here. These are going to become orange. They're going to go from green to yellow to orange to crimson, glorious, beautiful red. One of my favorite colors in nature, especially when it comes to fall color. And we don't get usually a lot of crimson here in Southern California. Some plants do change that color sometimes, but that's beside the point of what I'm trying to make here. These are one of the most beautiful sights in fall and early winter before the birds ravage the heck out of them. So we're going to head down into this more wooded area, and it seems to be a lot of toyon here, so I think I picked a really good trail to showcase this plant. Now there are some areas here in Southern California where there's been a little bit of a kind of like a fire blight or dieback on a lot of the toyons, and some of them do look very scraggly, and some of them have struggled quite a bit. But then, I've noticed that a lot here in the San Diego area. But there are also some areas where they just continue to grow magnificently large, plump and juicy with huge red pomes on them. So one place to see lots of really beautiful, luscious toyons would be places like Rancho Mission Canyon, which is not that far from here. It's only about a couple of short miles. Rancho Mission Canyon is a great place to see toyon. Catch it off of Marjoram Avenue. But we're going to talk about some of the habitats of toyons. Toyons grow in a huge variety of environments. They're very well known from chaparral and oak woodland, especially coast live oak. Coast live oaks and toyons are basically two peas in a pod. So if you're in an area with a lot of heavy coast live oak woodland, you could just about be guaranteed to see toyon in the vicinity. Toyons especially love canyons. And I thought I read somewhere that the word toyon is from Spanish toyon, T-O-A-Y, T-O-L-L-O-N, I believe. I read that somewhere. I don't remember where I read it, but it kind of might refer to a canyon, a type of habitat that toyons love. So we'll see if we get a lot of toyons in here, because this is where you'd expect to see them. And mixed in the understory of coast live oak woodland would be a great place to see toyon, because they are very closely linked with coast live oaks. So we'll see if we can find some nearby. This is the type of habitat you expect to see toyon. Right here. Coast live oak woodland. Coast live oaks and toyons are basically joined at the hip. And of course, now that I want to show you that example, now I'm not seeing it, which is kind of sad. Alright, so in my last clip, I attempted to try to describe how toyons and coast live oaks are so deeply intertwined. So I was hiking through a spot of coast live oaks, and I failed miserably because under those coast live oaks there wasn't even one single toyon. Because normally, coast live oaks and toyons are pretty hand in hand. Now, here we go. We have the coast live oak here, Quercus agrifolia, variety agrifolia. And then, right next to it is its companion, the Toyon. However, this is a very tall Toyon. And this is how they can get sometimes. When left alone, not disturbed by fire or other disturbance. Yeah, this one's more of a Toyon tree than a shrub. So yes, they do have the capacity to occasionally become a small tree. Not extremely common, but not extremely rare either. So yes, this is a Toyon right here. It's probably about 30 feet tall. Typically, Toyons, in most cases, are going to be anywhere from 10 to 15 feet tall, but they can get quite large at times. Now, I read in one of my gardening books that there was a supposedly an 80-foot Toyon in the city of Long Beach. I read that, yeah, some kind of a book about gardening with California native plants. Now, I've never been able to find any other information about an 80-foot Toyon. But speaking of large Toyons, not that far off from where those coast live oaks are, there's a nice stand of luscious older Toyons right here. And then they love canyons, so now I'm not stepping any further because there's a lot of western poison oak here, but I can see these things are chock full of fruit. And of course, not that far away are coast live oaks, of course. Of course, I kind of felt a little embarrassed when I was yapping about coast live oaks and Toyons being close companions. They are. Fortunately, I haven't shown you the real clear-cut evidence, but here we go again. Here's a coast live oak. There's a Toyon. But I am very steadfast in trying to back up my claims with evidence. And here we go. Here's a prime example right here. So we've got a lot of coast live oak here. Again, Quercus agrifolia, variety agrifolia. We've got a Fremont cottonwood up here. But here we go again. We've got some very nice coast live oaks around here, some younger ones. And of course, more Toyon. So yes, Toyon loves oak woodland, especially the coast live oaks. Now in mid-elevation mountains, if you're below 5,000 feet, you will also likely see Toyons with canyon live oaks in the foothills of the mountains, and if you go up in the Sierras, you'll probably see Toyons below 5,000 feet mixing in with canyon live oaks as well. They do like oak woodlands. See, here we go. Now I'm finally able to show evidence of my claim. Toyon, coast live oak, 2 peas in a pod. Now, also, when Toyons are growing in woodlands, they'll also mix it up with sycamores, willows. Especially the Toyons will be a little bit above where most of the riparian species are, like willows and cottonwoods and ash trees, sycamores. But the sycamores that grow on the outer edge of the riparian area will often have Toyons growing underneath them as well. So that's one habitat. Now Toyons are also, like in one of my previous clips, where you can see the Toyons are growing in the middle of coastal sage scrub and chaparral. Now, Toyon is known to grow very well in chaparral. It can become a well-established chaparral shrub. And also, even in coastal sage scrub. Like the first clip of the Mission Trails portion of this video, I was showing some in a the Mission Trails Visitor Center parking lot is kind of an area of coastal sage scrub, and usually toyons can grow large even in chaparral and coastal sage scrub, though sometimes I've noticed in chaparral they tend to be smaller, and that's not always the case, but sometimes it's weird. You would think they would grow larger in chaparral than they would in coastal sage scrub, because coastal sage scrub is drier than chaparral, but that's not always the case. I mean, they can grow large in chaparral, they can grow large anywhere, but for some reason in oak woodlands and in coastal sage scrub, and there's a subset of coastal sage scrub, sometimes known as a subset of chaparral, called sumac toyon scrubland, sometimes known as Toyon sumac chaparral. And that entails species of sumacs, especially here in the lower elevation, lemonade sumac or lemonade berry, toyon, laurel sumac, and sometimes sugarbush sumac. Now, that's a kind of a subset of coastal sage scrub that has areas of coastal sage scrub typicals, like Broombaccharis, California sagebrush, but also has the benefit of larger woodier shrubs. We're also talking about sages too, sagebrush and the sages, but they also have a lot of larger woodier shrubs like lemonade sumac or lemonade berry, Rosaceae, laurel sumac, Maleae laurina, and toyon. So there's a subset, again, it kind of walks the line between coastal sage scrub and chaparral, of toyon sumac scrubland. And that's a lot of what this hillside is up here. And that's a very common subset of either, again, kind of walks the line between it. Like for instance, this well-vegetated hillside here, a lot of woody shrubs, mostly lemonade sumac. Lemonade sumac tends to be the dominant plant in toyon sumac scrublands. And this is lemonade sumac or lemonade berry, Rosaceae, which is also a very common companion to toyon. In fact, here we go. This right here is in fact a toyon right here, right in the middle there. And we got lots of laurel sumac and lemonade sumac on the hillsides. So yes, it's a pretty common woody companion of those. Now, as we move on to the latter portion of this video, I want to discuss the plant in its full autumn glory. So in the next portion of this video, should be shot sometime in October or November. We'll basically wrap up talking about the toyon, and we're going to get a look at those beautiful, rich red pomes that are just so intoxicatingly beautiful to see. So stay tuned for that portion of the video, and thanks for watching thus far. Wanted to, before we really segment into the autumn segment of this spotlight on toyon, I'm going to give you a good view of the aforementioned toyon sumac scrubland at its highest form of development. Now, toyon can grow on both north and south facing slopes, north facing being more moisture retentive, and south facing being much drier, more arid. Now, toyons tend to develop best on more of these north facing slopes here, as you see. Now, you notice it looks like chaparral, how densely packed these large woody shrubs are. And with the large thicket forming lemonade berries or lemonade sumacs, they can form extensive thickets. But a lot of botanists don't consider this true chaparral. So I'm going to refer to from now on as toyon sumac shrubland or scrubland. Now, here we go. probably the most numerous plant, again, lemonade berry, Rosaceae. However, Toyon can be very numerous in openings in extensive thickets of these sumacs. And lemonade berry is a true sumac because another name is lemonade sumac. But you can see here, got a lot of ripening fruits here on this Toyon. And sometimes in the middle of these Toyon sumac scrublands, where Toyons can sometimes reach some of their largest sizes. Sometimes they may become taller in oak woodlands, but they tend to be lankier because they have to compete with the coast live oaks for sunlight. They still, for some reason, love growing with coast live oaks. But here you can see this very dense stand of mostly lemonade berry or lemonade sumac, which is usually the dominant shrub in Toyon sumac scrubland. But as you see here, you can get some of this on south-facing slopes too. However, it's not going to be quite as dense. As you look on this more south-facing slopes here, you can see the shrubs are not very densely packed. That's basically your larger essence of, your more formal essence of coastal sage scrub. A lot of sagebrush, black sage, white sage on that sunny side. But then you switch to a north-facing slope, you're going to get huge stands of mostly lemonade berry with some laurel sumac mixing in, maybe even some small coast live oak trees, and of course Toyon. So basically Toyon can be found in just about every single microhabitat in this area. You'll find, like I said, you'll find some Toyons here on the dry south-facing slopes. They'll probably be smaller, more stunted. You'll find them in the chaparral. A lot of times competing with chamise and scrub oaks. So that's why sometimes they don't tend to be as prevalent sometimes in some areas of chaparral. And then Toyon sumac scrubland on north-facing slopes here in what's mostly coastal sage scrub is where you'll see sometimes Toyons get their largest, with their largest trunks, their largest size. So I figured I would show you a form of this true Toyon sumac scrubland before moving on to the ripened fruits. Alright, so now we're reaching the final portion of this video. As I've mentioned before, this video has been taking place over the last couple months, last few months actually, and today will represent the full glory of the Toyon in late fall and early winter. The ripened fruits. So here we are. We are at a Toyon in full glory, full late autumn glory, with all of these beautiful orange to crimson red pomes that make this plant so spectacular going towards the winter months. So here we go. Just look at the spectacular fruits on these plants. Here's kind of an up close of these beautiful pomes. Now, there have been a couple of nicknames for this plant as a result from these beautiful, luscious red fruits. One common name of this plant, besides being Toyon, which is the most common, is Christmas berry and California holly. So let's see. Christmas berry, because a lot of times this plant will have fruit on it well into the early half of the winter months. A lot of times the plant will still have lots of luscious red pomes on it in the middle of December, late December, around Christmas. And also, it's basically our version of the so-called holly plant. Now, these plants are not botanically related to hollies. These plants are botanically related to roses, apples, pears, not related to hollies, which are in their own family. If you might take a closer look at some of those fruits, they do kind of structurally look like apples or pears. Again, because they are in the same subgroup, the Maleae, of the rose family. So these fruits are pomes. So Christmas berry is actually a misnomer for the fruit, because inside the fruit has a small core, just like an apple or a pear. If you look carefully, you can kind of see where the calyx of the fruit is and how structurally similar they are to those little dimpled areas at the bottom of an apple. So now there are some rumors, and I don't know if they're 100% true, that the name Hollywood potentially was linked to the abundance of this plant in the hills which reside above Hollywood, which would be the far eastern portion of the Santa Monica Mountains, which form Mount Lee, where the Hollywood sign is. However, it might not have been the reason why Hollywood was named, but that is a potential reason. But I've read that it might not actually be the reason why Hollywood was named. If that's not the case, then I really don't know, and that would be something more for movie buffs, Hollywood buffs. But it has been suggested that the California holly, aka Toyon, was a potential inspiration for the name. So what other aspects of holly does this plant resemble? Well, if you look at the leaves are serrated edged, but they're not all wrinkly and extremely spiny like holly. See, the leaves are narrowly, not quite linear, but narrowly ovate with toothed edges on them. So, very superficially resemble a holly. One type of plant here that resembles holly a lot more with its leaves would be coast live oak, would be a little more similar, Quercus agrifolia variety agrifolia. And one plant that even looks more like holly is the aptly named, and actually a rose family relative of the Toyon, hollyleaf cherry. These leaves are a lot more holly-like, and this is Prunus ilicifolia, subspecies ilicifolia. So these leaves are a lot more holly-like. So I think what some people would do would be take the boughs of coast live oak leaves. Again, coast live oak leaves are more holly-like than Toyon. I think sometimes they would mix those with the sprigs of Toyon pomes. And Toyons have become a very popular landscape plant over the last few decades. And there's no reason to wonder why. With the natural beauty, large size, and sometimes even tree form that this plant can take, there's really no reason to wonder why this is a popular ornamental, and rightly so. It is easily one of the most beautiful plants you can come across when you're hiking out in the oak woodland, coastal sage scrub, and chaparral. It'll make an absolutely wonderful addition to your garden. And in my experience, I've only done it once, and it was years ago. Toyons are really not that hard to regenerate. They're not hard to germinate. In fact, when I sprouted my Toyons back in 2013, all I did was collected the pomes from a park. I didn't collect it from wildlands because these plants have been harvested so much for Christmas decorations that it was actually made illegal in California to harvest Toyon. So instead of collecting seeds from the wild, I went to a park in San Diego and collected some poems from a landscape park. And all I did was take the seeds out of the poem, sprinkle the seeds, and keep them moist, and they germinated within a couple weeks. So these plants do not need fire to regenerate. Seedlings can and will come up during wet periods of the winter months when there's enough moisture in the soil from the rains. So toyons do not require fire scarification, and I don't know if you want to use a small stratification period. I didn't when I germinated my toyons. I just planted them right out of the poems, and I had a very decent germination rate, a pretty good germination rate. I had several toyons from the relatively few poems that I collected. So, and they can be pretty fast growing. So if you're thinking about growing a toyon and you got the space for a very large shrub, which can be easily trimmed to be a small tree, then you really can't go wrong with this plant. It's native here to Southern California, sometimes even grows on the drier slopes. It prefers the moister canyon locations, north-facing slopes, and the understory of coast live oak woodland. However, I've seen it growing on south-facing slopes in coastal sage scrub, so it does have a pretty good drought tolerance. But if in doubt, give it a little supplemental moisture to keep it looking lush, but don't overwater it either, or else you're going to be looking at possible rotting plants, which is pretty bad. So toyon is a beautiful, pretty easy, and sometimes very fast-growing plant that you can expect a foot to a couple feet a year if your plants are vigorous and healthy. Absolute must grow plant here in Southern California. I'm going to get a couple more pictures of it, and then I'm going to end this video off. Before I end this video, just a couple of minor notes that there is some variability in these plants. Now this is typically what they look like pre-ripening. So these fruits are still in the process of ripening. They kind of have a golden, slightly orangish tinge. Now there are a couple varieties. One of them is mostly a horticultural variety, and one of them is sometimes found in nature, and they're both very similar looking. Now we do occasionally get the toyons that will ripen with yellow pomes. You see one? These ones here are your typical orange red to crimson red. Now, going back to this one with the ripening fruits, there are some where the pomes even stay a little more yellow than this. Again, this one's in the process of ripening. I can see deeper oranges starting to appear, but some toyons will ripen their fruits as more of a yellow color, closer to this and closer to that. Now, in the horticultural trade, there is the Davis Gold Toyon, which is supposed to be a pretty popular horticultural variety, but sometimes in the wild you can get it naturally occurring, and a lot of times botanists will give it a varietal name, which would be Heteromeles arbutifolia variety Cerina, C-E-R-I-N-A. So there are plants that occur in the wild occasionally that you'll find yellow pomes. I haven't seen it personally. I've never seen variety Cerina in the wild, but I've seen the Davis Gold in an arboretum before. So I've seen it with the yellow pomes, and it's just as beautiful looking too. So when you're out, you're hiking in low to mid elevations in the coastal, foothill, and lower mountain slopes, keep an eye out for toyon. It can be a very abundant plant, and it is a wonderful ornamental that would be great in your Southern California or Central or even Northern California gardens. So there you have it. Heteromeles arbutifolia. The noble, beautiful Toyon. One of the coolest plants you can come across. Beautiful Toyon. Beautiful, shiny green, medium green above, and paler, lighter green underneath. Tooth-edged leaves, beautiful gray bark that could furrow with age. Pomes that ripen from these beautiful 5-petal white flowers that turn into these fruits that go through stages of green, yellow, orange, and then sometimes really deep crimson red, providing seasons of awesome variability and beauty. You can't go wrong. Heteromeles arbutifolia. That will finally wrap it up on this video that's been 4 months in the making. Thanks for watching my spotlight. I hope you enjoyed this, and I feel that I finally did the Toyon justice after having recorded my first version, my first spotlight video of this back in 2020 on really bad quality camera equipment. So hopefully this will do it justice finally. That's it. Toyon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on another spotlight.